She came out of the waterfall alone, then froze when she saw who was watching. No one ever tells you how exhausting it is to be invisible. Not the kind of invisible where no one sees you, but the kind where they look right through you. Where your name is said quickly in meetings, your ideas repeated later by someone louder, someone richer, someone more important. Where your effort keeps the machine running, but the credit always lands somewhere else. For Maya Ellison, invisibility had become routine. At 26, she worked harder than anyone on her floor at Crestline Holdings, a luxury development firm obsessed with image, power, and hierarchy. She was efficient, sharp, and relentlessly prepared, but she was also just an assistant. Not a partner. Not an executive. Not someone people bothered to truly know. Especially not him. Daniel Hawthorne. Her boss. The man whose name alone made rooms fall silent. The man who signed contracts worth more than Maya's lifetime earnings without blinking. The man who barely looked at her unless something had gone wrong, yet somehow always noticed when others failed. That week, Crestline Holdings hosted an executive leadership retreat at a secluded mountain estate, an isolated resort surrounded by dense forest, stone paths, and untouched wilderness. Maya hadn't expected to be invited. She never was. So when her name appeared on the itinerary, she assumed it was a mistake. "It's because you handle everything," a colleague had said lightly. "Someone needs to actually make sure things work." That was always the reason. The drive to the resort felt longer than it was. The further they went, the more the city disappeared, replaced by towering trees and mist-covered cliffs. The air grew cooler, quieter, cleaner. Maya told herself this was just work. But her shoulders never relaxed. Daniel spent most of the first day commanding rooms, confident, decisive, untouchable. Maya followed 3 steps behind, tablet in hand, fixing problems before anyone else noticed them. She blended into the background like she always did. By evening, exhaustion pressed heavily against her ribs. When the welcome dinner ended, laughter echoing across the terrace, Maya quietly slipped away. She didn't ask permission. She didn't tell anyone. She just followed a narrow trail she'd noticed earlier, disappearing into the trees. The forest swallowed sound quickly. The hum of conversation faded. Her footsteps softened against damp earth. The further she walked, the lighter her chest felt. Then she heard it. Water. Powerful. Constant. Alive. The trail opened into a clearing, and there it was. A waterfall. Not massive but breathtaking. Clear water spilling down smooth rock into a natural pool below, mist hanging in the air like breath. No signs. No paths. No people. Maya looked around. Nothing. For the first time in months she felt truly alone. The weight she carried every day, expectations, judgments, restraint, began to loosen. She stepped closer, letting the cool air settle against her skin. She hesitated only once before slipping into the water, allowing the shock to steal her breath and the silence to quiet her thoughts. She stayed longer than she meant to, floating, breathing, existing without being watched. When she finally moved toward the edge, water dripping from her hair, she felt something shift. A presence. The forest was quiet, but not empty. Maya froze. Her eyes lifted toward the trail. Daniel Hawthorne stood at the edge of the clearing. Still, silent, staring. Time collapsed. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears as instinct took over. She turned away, stepping back into the water, her mind scrambling for something to say, something to do, something to make this moment disappear. Daniel stopped himself. He turned sharply, his back to her. "I didn't know anyone was here," he said, his voice tense, stripped of authority. "I was following the trail. I'll leave." He didn't move. Neither did she. The air between them felt charged, fragile, and dangerous. This wasn't the polished CO she knew. This was a man caught off guard, shaken, human. "Please," Maya said quietly. "Just give me a moment." He nodded, rigid, staring into the trees as though they held answers. She moved quickly, heart racing, gathering herself with shaking hands. When she finally spoke again, her voice steadier than she felt. "Okay." Daniel turned. Their eyes met. Something changed. Not desire. Not scandal. Recognition. For the first time since she'd worked for him, Daniel didn't look past her. He looked at her. And Maya realized, this moment wasn't about exposure. It was about being seen. By morning, the forest was silent. But the office wasn't. Maya didn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, the image returned, not of the waterfall, not of the cold water or the forest, but of Daniel Hawthorne's expression when he finally looked at her like a person instead of a function. It wasn't desire that unsettled her. It was respect. Or at least, the sudden awareness that she had been underestimated far more deeply than she'd realized. By sunrise, the retreat buzzed with quiet energy. Executives gathered over coffee, voices low, smiles sharp. The mountain air hadn't softened anyone, it had sharpened them. Maya entered the conference room early as always, arranging materials, syncing presentations, anticipating needs before they were spoken. It was muscle memory at this point. Daniel arrived last. He didn't acknowledge her at first. Not coldly. Not deliberately. Carefully. The meeting began like any other. Numbers, projections, strategy, but something felt off. People watched more closely. Listened harder. Maya felt eyes tracking her movements in a way they never had before. Then came the interruption. "Before we move on," said Veronica Slate, a senior director known for her polished cruelty, "I'd like to clarify something." The room stilled. Veronica's smile was pleasant. Calculated. "I noticed our junior staff member was unavailable last night," she continued lightly. "During an executive dinner." Pause. Maya's fingers tightened around her tablet. "I was handling logistics," Maya said evenly. Veronica tilted her head. "In the forest?" The word hung there, sharp and deliberate. A few people chuckled softly. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Is there a point to this?" he asked. Veronica raised her hands innocently. "Of course. Transparency. This retreat is about professionalism after all." The implication was clear. Maya felt heat rise in her chest, not embarrassment but anger. She had worked too hard for this moment to be reduced to whispers. "I completed every assigned task," Maya said. Her voice didn't shake. "If there was a delay, it didn't affect operations." "That's not the concern," Veronica replied. "Perception matters. Especially for someone in your position." "Your position." Daniel stood. The movement alone commanded silence. "Maya Ellison coordinated this entire retreat," he said calmly. "Every session, every schedule adjustment, every contingency. If anyone here believes her presence or absence reflects poorly on her professionalism, they're free to explain how." No one spoke. Veronica's smile faltered, but only slightly. "Of course," she said. "I just believe optics are important. Some of us don't have the luxury of blending into the background." Maya understood then. This wasn't about her behavior. It was about her place. The meeting continued, but something had shifted. Maya felt it like pressure behind her eyes. The quiet judgments. The sideways glances. She had been invisible before, but now she was exposed. After the session, Daniel caught up with her in the hallway. "I should have stopped that sooner," he said quietly. "You didn't need to defend me," Maya replied. "Yes," he said firmly. "I did." She looked at him, then really looked, and saw something unfamiliar. Guilt. Regret. "They don't see what you do," he continued. "They never have." Maya exhaled slowly. "I know." The honesty surprised them both. Later that afternoon, the tension exploded. A presentation malfunctioned. Files missing, data corrupted. Veronica seized the moment. "This is exactly why junior staff shouldn't manage executive materials," she said loudly. "The risk is unacceptable." Maya stepped forward. "I didn't prepare that file," she said. "It was reassigned this morning." "To whom?" Daniel asked. Veronica hesitated. "Me," she said finally. "But I delegated." "The metadata shows the file was altered 15 minutes before the session," Maya interrupted. "From a personal device." Silence. Daniel's gaze sharpened. "Is that accurate?" Veronica flushed. "I don't see how that's relevant." "It's very relevant," Daniel said coldly. The room shifted. Power recalibrated. For the first time, Maya wasn't defending herself. She was standing in the truth. And the truth had weight. They tried to break her in public, without knowing who she really was. By the third day of the retreat, the tension was no longer subtle. It lived in the pauses between sentences. In the way conversations stopped when Maya entered a room. In the smiles that didn't reach people's eyes. What had once been indifference had turned into scrutiny. And scrutiny, Maya knew, was often more dangerous. She stayed focused, professional, silent. That silence, unfortunately, was exactly what some people mistook for weakness. The afternoon panel was meant to be a showcase. Top executives presenting future initiatives to potential investors who had arrived early. It was the kind of setting where reputations were built or quietly destroyed. Maya sat along the wall, laptop open, monitoring data feeds and projections. She noticed the changes immediately. Numbers that didn't align. Slides rearranged. A narrative subtly, but deliberately, shifted. Someone was rewriting history in real time. When the Q&A began, one of the investors leaned forward. "This expansion strategy," he said, tapping the screen, "wasn't this originally proposed as a risk mitigation model rather than an aggressive acquisition?" Veronica answered smoothly. "The assistant misunderstood the directive. We corrected it." Several heads turned toward Maya. The room waited. Something in Maya hardened. "No," she said calmly. "That's not accurate." The air snapped tight. Veronica's eyes flashed. "Excuse me?" "The original proposal was mine," Maya continued. "It was designed to stabilize entry into volatile markets using phased partnerships. What's on the screen now removes those safeguards." A murmur rippled through the room. Veronica laughed lightly. "You're saying the senior team altered your idea incorrectly?" "I'm saying," Maya replied evenly, "that my analysis was changed without my consent, and that change increases exposure by 40%. Daniel stood slowly. "Is that true?" he asked. Veronica's composure slipped, just for a fraction of a second. "Maya is overstepping," Veronica said sharply. "This is not her role." Maya looked directly at the investors. "I apologize for the confusion," she said. "But if Crestline values long-term stability over short-term spectacle, the original framework should be reviewed." Silence. Then one investor nodded. "I'd like to see the original." Daniel turned to Maya. "Can you pull it up?" "I already have," she said. The file appeared instantly, time-stamped, sourced, indisputable. The room shifted. This wasn't an assistant scrambling. This was a strategist prepared for war. After the session, the whispers became louder, but now they carried a different tone. Not dismissal. Curiosity. Veronica cornered Maya near the elevators. "You think embarrassing me will elevate you?" she hissed. "You don't belong in rooms like that." Maya met her gaze. "I've belonged my entire life. You just never noticed." That evening, Daniel requested a private meeting. Not as her boss. As someone finally asking. "Why didn't I know?" he asked quietly. Maya smiled, not bitterly, not proudly. "Because you never asked." She told him then. About her background. About the years she'd spent consulting anonymously for firms that didn't want her face attached to their success. About the nonprofit analytics work she'd done under a shell company to avoid bias. About the reason she took an assistant role, to observe systems from the inside. Daniel listened stunned. "You could have been a partner anywhere," he said. "I tried," Maya replied. "They didn't hear me either. But power leaves patterns. I wanted to understand them. And now?" "Now," she said, "I'm done being invisible." Daniel exhaled slowly. The pieces finally fit. The truth wasn't loud, but when it finally spoke, everything changed. The final day of the retreat arrived heavy with anticipation. Word had spread, not through announcements but through intuition. The kind that travels faster than facts. Something was coming. People felt it in the way Daniel Hawthorne walked with purpose instead of polish. In the way senior executives avoided Veronica's eyes. In the way Maya Ellison no longer sat against the wall. She sat at the table. The board members joined via secure video conference. Faces framed in glass and authority. This session wasn't on the public agenda. It never would be. Daniel began without preamble. "There have been serious concerns raised regarding conduct, credit appropriation, and strategic misrepresentation," he said. "Today we address them." Veronica smiled thinly. "This feels dramatic." Daniel didn't return the smile. "Maya," he said, "please proceed." The room stilled. Maya stood, not hurried, not hesitant. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She presented. Data timelines. Version histories. Email chains. Pattern analysis. A quiet, undeniable map of how ideas flowed upward and recognition flowed elsewhere. How warnings were removed. How risks were concealed. How one voice had been consistently minimized, until it couldn't be ignored. "This isn't personal," Maya said calmly. "It's structural." A board member leaned closer to his screen. "You're saying this happened repeatedly?" "Yes," Maya replied. "Across departments. Across years." Veronica scoffed. "You expect us to believe an assistant uncovered what internal audits didn't?" Maya met her gaze. "I wasn't looking for permission." Silence. Then one board member spoke. "We'll need to review this immediately." Daniel nodded. "You already have. Secure packets were delivered last night." Veronica's face drained of color. The board session ended quickly after that. decisively. Security arrived shortly after, not for Maya, for Veronica. As she was escorted out, she looked back once, angry, stunned, disbelieving. Maya didn't flinch. Later, on the terrace overlooking the valley, Daniel stood beside Maya as the sun dipped low. "You didn't just expose a person," he said quietly. "You exposed a culture." Maya watched the horizon. "Then fix it." He nodded. "With you." She turned to him, not surprised but steady. "I won't stay quiet," she said. "And I won't stay small." "I wouldn't ask you to," Daniel replied. For the first time, there was no imbalance in the space between them. Only respect. They judged her by her position, until the world learned her name. The announcement didn't come with fanfare. No dramatic press conference. No carefully staged applause. Just a quiet update on the company intranet that rippled outward faster than anyone expected. Organizational restructuring, effective immediately. By noon, the entire company knew. Departments paused. Messages flooded internal channels. People reread the notice 3 times to be sure they hadn't misunderstood. Maya Ellison had not been dismissed. She had not been protected. She had been promoted. Not as a favor. Not as damage control. But as Chief Strategy and Risk Advisor, reporting directly to the board. The same executives who had once spoken over her now waited for her input. The same voices that had dismissed her now quoted her. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Maya didn't celebrate loudly. She returned to her desk, now a different desk in a different wing, and opened the same notebook she'd always used. The one filled with observations no one had asked for, systems no one had questioned, solutions no one had wanted to hear. Until now. That afternoon, Daniel addressed the company. "Leadership is not volume," he said. "It's accountability. And we failed to listen. That ends today." He didn't mention the waterfall. He didn't mention rumors. He mentioned results. Maya stood beside him, not behind him. Afterward, employees she barely knew approached her. Some thanked her. Some apologized. Some just looked relieved, like something oppressive had finally lifted. Later, as the sun dipped behind the mountains for the last time that week, Maya returned to the forest alone. The waterfall was the same. Unchanged. Still powerful. She stood at the edge, listening to the water crash against stone, thinking about how close she had come to shrinking herself, again. She smiled softly. She hadn't needed to become louder. She had needed to stop disappearing. Daniel found her there, keeping his distance. "You changed everything," he said. "No," Maya replied. "I reminded people to look." They stood in silence for a moment. Then she turned away first, not because she was small, but because she was finally free to choose her own direction.